reach beyond the darkness, beyond the grave, to an unexplored dimension as we travel to the mysterious realm of ghosts. Journey with us into the world of ghost stories. Hello, I'm Patrick Macnee. You know the eerie feeling you get walking through an old deserted graveyard? Your hair stands on end, and unintentionally, you keep looking behind you. Now you're ready to join me as we bring you an hour of spine-chilling tales. Leave conventional logic behind as we enter a fascinating and unknown realm of ghost stories.
The Tower of London. Well, there are some spine-chilling tales to tell you about that one.
The visions that are reported in the Orrantia Mansion are always described as a young woman in a white dress.
She's really been not a scary ghost, but a mischievous ghost.
For centuries, these walls have soaked up the sounds of torture, execution, murder, suicide, and grief. And today, dark cries still echo through every spiral in the Tower of London, perhaps as a grave reminder that our past is still with us. There's the theory that ghosts are inconsolable spirits, reliving moments of intense emotional impact, almost as if they are trapped in some bizarre time lapse. Growing up in England, ghost stories become a part of life. With a long and bloody history stretching over 900 years, the Tower of London is the perfect setting for some of the most famous hauntings in the world.
The Tower of London. Oh dear. Well, there are some spine-chilling tales to tell you about that one. You know, you really can't expect anything else with all the murders and the suicides and the executions. The place was a regular bloodbath.
On record, there are 2,900 names of prisoners who were held in the tower over the centuries, from royalty to paupers. Heavy footsteps sounding through empty hallways, headless figures floating around, and sudden gusts of wind whipping through where there are no open doors or windows. Hair-raising accounts which leave a chill in the air and your heart in your throat. Inside the White Tower, the torture chamber, where the wretched were tormented and ultimately left to die horrid deaths.
The guards who patrol the tower at night claim to have heard agonizing screams echoing through the doors of the White Tower. They say it could only be Anne Askew. Well, who knows? Maybe it is.
Accused of witchcraft centuries ago, Anne Askew was brought to this hellhole. In order to get her to confess her crimes, her body was almost torn apart on the rack. Eventually, she died, her screams the only testimonial of her suffering. Earning its name through the countless murders committed here over centuries, the Bloody Tower is still haunted today. Most famous of all is the 15th century murder of the two young princes, who've been sighted strolling hand in hand, a grim reminder of their brutal deaths. Their story is a sad one. Terrified of the two princes' claim to the throne, King Richard III secretly ordered their killings. And one night, while the two brothers were sleeping, they were strangled in their beds. Their bodies were hastily buried, first in the basement of the Wakefield Tower, and then at the foot of a staircase. Another place where victims were brought to their knees with merciless torture is the Queen's house. Witnesses have claimed to hear the grinding sounds of the torture rack. And of course, the screams. Always the screams. It is here, in the Queen's house, where the famous Anne Boleyn spent her final days. As the second wife of King Henry VIII, Anne was executed in order for the king to marry Jane Seymour.
Anne Boleyn, by all accounts, was a peculiar woman. She had 6 fingers on one of her hands and 6 toes on one of her feet. In those days, this surely would have been regarded as an evil omen.
King Henry VIII, of course, fell in love with Jane Seymour, and because the Catholic Church condemned divorces, the king's only way out of his marriage to Anne Boleyn was to have her beheaded. After her death, the room where Anne awaited her execution has been described as having an unpleasant and menacing atmosphere. Some witnesses even described a peculiar perfume and a feeling of suffocation.
Anne Boleyn has also been spotted at the window, forever staring at something, maybe someone. One of the most incredible anecdotes is the one of the talking head, appearing from nowhere, rambling on endlessly. I don't think anybody's been able to put a history behind that one. I don't think anybody's brave enough to stay long enough to find out.
In folklore, ravens are birds that manifest bad omens. But here at the tower, they are ever present for quite the opposite reason. It all started when King Charles II ordered the ravens to be removed from the tower because their screeching drove him up the wall.
It was the king's astrologer that intervened. He predicted that if the ravens were chased away, the tower would fall, and along with that, the English monarchy.
Today, the ravens are still at the tower, their wings painlessly clipped so that tradition could linger. In the courtyard, there's even the Raven Cemetery. Perhaps there was some truth to the prediction. The monarchy still stands, so does the tower, with its ghosts. The visions that are reported in the Orrantia Mansion are always described as a young woman in a white dress. Strange hauntings are not only housed within these tower walls, or even within this country. History is filled with legends of those who came back from the grave to seek their revenge. Our next story takes us to a small town in Mexico where a brutal murder unleashes just such a haunting. The town of El Fuerte in Sinaloa, Mexico, was a quiet place back in the 1800s. It looked like many other colonial towns in the area. With its lovely plaza in the center of town, the one thing that set El Fuerte apart was the Orrantia Mansion, conspicuously located at the edge of the plaza. It was a huge structure, occupying nearly a full city block. It was lavishly decorated with furnishings from around the world, a chandelier from Italy, furniture from Vienna. It was built to the discerning taste of the wealthiest man in the state, Francisco Camilo Orantier. In 1869, he died, leaving the house and his fortune to his only heir, 18-year-old Adelaida. With all this wealth, you would think the beautiful young woman would have a perfect life. But instead, it seemed that Adelaida was too preoccupied with protecting her fortune for anything else. She became eccentric, withdrawn, antisocial, and so she ended up a lonely spinster in the huge house, rarely venturing outside as the years went by. Then, on September the 26th, 1927, the life of Adelaida took a violent turn. As she slept in her bed, she was brutally murdered. The fortune which had brought her all the luxuries of life was the cause of her death. Her trusted maid, Elisa, confessed to killing Adelaida for her money. It seemed to the people of El Fuerte that this would be the tragic end to the story of Adelaida Orantier. Little did they know that rather than an end, this would actually mark the beginning of a bizarre new chapter. People began hearing unusual sounds and seeing strange visions in the vacant Orrantia Mansion.
In the town of El Fuerte, many people have been talking about this old house and about the ghost in the house. Many people have seen a woman in the balcony or in some of the rooms and the letters, but there are some ghosts in the house.
The visions that are reported in the Orrantia Mansion are always described as a young woman in a white dress, one that could be a wedding dress. She has been spotted in many parts of the huge house. Often she is seen carrying a candelabra of lighted white candles. One night, a local photographer was able to snap an amazing photo in the house. He described seeing a woman in a white dress walk by carrying a candelabra. In the photo, you can plainly see the trail of the candles, and in the center is the faint outline of a woman. Several other people have had first-hand experiences with the Orrantia ghost.
En una ocasión venía yo caminando por la calle que está frente al alto de los Orrantia.
One time I was walking along the street down by the Orrantia house. All of a sudden I glanced over and I saw a woman on the balcony. I recognized her. It was Adelaida Orantier.
Yo sabía que esa era la única casa donde vivía.
I knew it was her. I knew her personally all my life. There she stood, looking exactly as she did as a young girl, in a long, flowing white gown.
Pues yo sabía perfectamente bien que ella ya había muerto.
But I knew perfectly well that she was dead. I'd been at her funeral 65 years ago. And now I was seeing her exactly as she looked when she was a young woman. I got very scared. I looked again, and to my disbelief, this time she went down and disappeared until I was staring at an empty balcony. Then I became terribly frightened and I ran home.
Y tuve que hacerlo porque los nervios me agarraron y tuve que correr.
I was so nervous, I had to run.
Another El Fuerte man still vividly remembers his encounter with the Orrantia ghost 30 years ago.
When I was a young man, I used to work in this house, sweeping the floor and taking care of some rooms in this house because it's a large and big house. And when I was doing my work, I heard a noise behind me. When I saw to see what was happening, then I saw suddenly a woman with a white dress walking from room to another room, and she disappeared into the wall. And I was very afraid, and I go very nervous outside of the house, running away because I really was very afraid. And then now the house is empty because the people doesn't want to go and rent or whatever. It's very, very strange.
Well, I can tell you, that is definitely one lovely old house I will not be spending the night in.
A story of a terror-stricken family whose home was built on top of an undisclosed graveyard.
A family in Texas experienced one of the most bizarre and troubling cases of poltergeist activity when they learned their dream home was built over an undisclosed graveyard. And the nightmare began.
This may seem like an ordinary neighborhood, but 7 out of 8 families picked up and moved far from here at tremendous cost, including losing their mortgages. I wonder what really happened to drive them all away.
The box office hit Poltergeist tells the story of a terror-stricken family whose home was built on top of an undisclosed graveyard. Good horror fiction? Not necessarily. During the same time the movie was released, these silver screen nightmares became reality for residents in a Texas subdivision. Their story began in 1981 when Ben and Jean Williams moved into their dream home, a newly constructed house in this brand new subdivision. Shortly after settling in, however, a strange feeling crept over them. At first, the feeling manifested itself slowly as mere oddities. Hundreds of ants invading the house, snakes slithering through the floorboards, plants not growing, and unusual sink spots in the yard that couldn't be filled in. Then other things began. Toilets flushing on their own, the garage door opening and closing by itself, unexplained noises and images, none of which had a logical explanation. At first, neither Jean nor Bill talked about what was happening or what could be causing it, although each had their own private thoughts. Thoughts that frightened and bewildered them, once too bizarre to even contemplate. It was as if their house were taking on a life of its own. Run by what? Ghosts? But why? How? Houses built in the Newport subdivision were built on what was once McKenzie family land. The McKenzies are no longer living, but at one time they were wealthy landowners with a huge plantation and countless slaves.
I just knew there was some slaves buried down. Yeah, that's what I heard. Slaves buried back up in there.
We spoke with Freddie Eagleton, the oldest living resident of Barrett Station.
Yeah, I've been here all my life.
He confirmed there were no grave markers in that area.
The place was owned by Will McKenzie, and he let, our folks bury up in here for a long time,
The site of these unmarked graves became known as Black Hope Cemetery. John Armstrong, the grandson of Harrison Barrett, founder of Barrett Station, showed us the place.
So do you have firsthand knowledge of the fact that in that Newport area there were actually people buried there?
That's true. That's true.
Descendants of the slaves of the McKenzies live here in Barrett Station, not far from Crosby. They remember Black Hope Cemetery. Some of their relatives are buried there.
I know one of my seniors that come here, he has a family that was buried out there at the Black Hope Cemetery.
Oh yeah, lots of people buried there. I have buried some of them in there myself.
We spoke with Keith Krizak, whose father Daniel owned White Cemetery during this time, one of the few established cemeteries in the area. I asked if he thought it was possible to have these homes built on top of a graveyard.
Folks were buried back there, and it's the cemetery. Just no one knew that there was a cemetery back there at all when they developed the area. So.
In fact, some did know.
Jasper Norton lived at the house behind me. He has since died, but he was one of the few people who warned the residents in the Newport area that they were building on graves. In fact, he himself buried people in those graves when he was 14 years old. He pointed out some of the unmarked grave sites, but apparently nobody listened to him.
As time went on, whatever spirits might have been awakened at the Williams house influenced everyone who came into contact with them. The family experienced an uncanny number of misfortunes, deaths, and diseases. Even the animals were affected, behaving strangely and dying unexpectedly. The Williams withstood their plight in silence. Then their worst fears were realized when their neighbors, building a pool, unearthed the corpses of two people, a black man and woman.
They would never find out that if they wouldn't dug a pool. I know where the graveyard was in that area before they went to building all in there. When they went in there and selling that land, and they just went selling, and they wasn't thinking about the grave was in there.
After that, the terror escalated. Footsteps became almost commonplace. Ben was the first to notice the shadowy figures that loomed in the dark. Sometimes they would literally attack him in the garage, suffocating him. Jean finally had enough. She took a shovel and began digging next to an old tree, a tree, she was warned, that marked a grave site. However, she didn't make it but a few inches down. Her daughter died suddenly that day. With nowhere to turn and no way to console themselves, the family left that house forever. Although there are people like realtors and neighbors who may not believe what happened to the Williams family, it was hard not to notice all the for sale signs.
The truth is, you never really know what you're building on top of. And in the process, if you disturb sleeping spirits, for this family, their lives can never be the same. For anyone else, well, hopefully, it's just a movie. This experience really hit the Williams hard, so much so they wrote a book to document their nightmare. And they firmly believed they weren't the only ones, that there are similar cases of poltergeist phenomenon. They encourage anyone with such experiences to write them in Montana.
Mom, there's a ghost up in my room.
She's really been not a scary ghost, but a mischievous ghost.
Our next story takes us back to England, where for centuries pubs and inns have been a popular gathering place, and the locals flirted with young barmaids. Not far from here, legend has it, one such barmaid remains, suspended in time, pining for the very love that ultimately caused her death.
On a hill near Wickham, England, a young woman stood waiting expectantly. In the cool night near the Hellfire Caves, her patience prevailed. 2 centuries later, the young woman still lingers. Her tragic tale traces back to the 1700s, when the George and Dragon Inn was a favorite place for travelers to stop over on their way through the town. At this inn, a pretty young woman served in the pub. She was known to the locals simply as Suki.
She was very young, very attractive, very popular with the local lads.
A sophisticated young gentleman used to make regular visits to this inn. His eye caught the attractive young barmaid. It wasn't long before Suki had fallen head over heels for this charming stranger.
She imagined that she was going to be whisked away and by this young gentleman.
The local boys didn't like the fact that Suki was all starry-eyed about this stranger. It took her attention away from them. One day, Suki received a note out of the blue, saying that she must wait at the Hellfire Caves for her darling that same night. Suki was ecstatic. She believed that this was the beginning of a new life.
And he was going to marry her. She packed her things and wore a white dress and snuck up to the hill and waited for him. And the local lads then jumped out from behind a tree, and she realised that it was a joke, cruel joke that they'd played on her.
This letter, which was meant as a good-natured prank by the young locals, turned into disaster.
She'd picked up some stones and started throwing them at the lads. At which point they probably threw a few back, and one hit her on the head.
Suki was knocked out. In a frenzy, the young locals carried the unconscious girl back to her room at the George and Dragon Inn. It is here, in room number 6, where she died later that night.
And she has haunted the inn since then, and wearing white and known as the White Lady.
Philip and his wife Cass ignored the strange happenings around the inn until one day when their son James, then only 4 years old, told his mom about a new guest.
Mom, there's a ghost up in my room. And she goes, oh, don't be stupid. There's no such thing as ghosts.
James made a sketch of his visitor. Something about this drawing made his parents ponder the strange possibilities. His drawing is that of a woman. On the side of her head, he had drawn a prominent Band-Aid, the exact place where the stone had hit Suki in the head. James casually accepts the regular visits from the lady in white.
She usually comes to see me at night, and she lives up in the attic, and sometimes when my friends come around, she hides from them.
She's really been not a scary ghost, but a mischievous ghost. A lot of household items go missing. We've had guests that have encountered her.
Well, she likes this place. She likes the attic especially, that's why she lives up there.
James' encounters with this mysterious lady don't frighten him. As a matter of fact, James has found a comforting companion in her. But there is another side to this unusual story. A terrifying history lies behind the Hell's Fire Caves, where Suki was supposed to meet her Prince Charming. At the time, a group from high society used these caves as a place of worship. Here, concealed to the outer world, they could pray to Satan in secret. This group was known as the Hell's Fire Club. Long, eerie corridors lead to secret little corners where the club members carried out satanic rituals at night. Inside the caves, carvings of evil faces line the walls, drawn 2 centuries ago by these Satanists. Nobody knew who the members of the club were. In fact, they could have even been regular visitors at the inn. A bizarre twist to this strange love story is that one of the Hell's Fire Club's members was a regular at the George and Dragon Inn. He was none other than the charming stranger who had swept Suki off her feet. We'll never know why Suki cannot find peace. Surely her presence isn't disturbing or frightening to anyone. Perhaps she just can't leave the one place she had found hope and a glimpse at happiness.
They say that you can't take it with you.
George met his untimely demise up here in room 7.
Even death couldn't separate him from his earthly possessions. As settlers flocked west during the gold rush, mining towns boomed and many greedy, often unscrupulous businessmen made their fortune, not in gold, but on the good luck of others. One such man left as his legacy the hotel he built and a bit of himself. Centuries later, they say guests who frequent the hotel never check out without an encounter with the infamous Mr. Lager himself.
Nothing at first seemed to really happen, but as I was sleeping, I felt not a malevolent presence, but as if someone was in the room. And then I heard a creaking, and as I glanced out of the corner of my eye, I saw the rocking chair moving, and I just laughed.
The Old West. A place where cowboys rode the terrain, saloons were the entertainment, and gunslingers became legends. But it was also a time that fostered and opened the floodgates for prosperity. It was 1849, the year of the California gold rush. The lure of instant wealth was like a magnet which drew thousands to the West. And over a century later, you can still find what remains of these old mining towns. The Lager Hotel in Mokelumne Hill, California, is one such place. a piece of the past left behind by George W. Lager, a sharp businessman who took advantage of the flourishing moment and reaped in large profits. Profits which, after he died, some say George refused to leave behind.
Just stories of articles moving around or being misplaced, or thinking you set something down in one place and you search around the whole room crazy for this one article, and then you look back and it's in the exact same spot where you thought you had left it.
George W. Lager came to California in response to the gold rush, but he didn't seek his fortune in the precious yellow metal.
I guess he was probably a real shrewd business person. Instead of digging for gold and working on a whim, he built a hotel and apparently made money.
In fact, Lager made a great deal of money. His primary income came from newly rich miners who lived and gambled away their fortunes at his hotel. But that wasn't the only way Lager filled his pockets.
He was a kind of a loan shark too, I guess, if you will, sort of a thing during the gold rush.
And it was his less than above board banking methods that caused more than a few people to hate the man. Lager lived in room number 7, where he could keep a close watch on business. He was almost never without a cigar or a beautiful woman, the envy of practically every man in town. George Lager had it all. But then suddenly, one day, it was all gone.
George was a cigar smoker. There won't be anybody up there, and sometimes you get a whiff of cigar smoke. Room 7 seems to catch the most of the weird things, the unexplainable little things, with the doors closing, the ruffles of the beds, and cigar smoke.
It is unclear who killed Lager. It might have been a miner who felt Lager duped him out of his hard-earned gold, or maybe it was a jilted paramour. One thing is certain, though. Today, room number 7 at the Lager Hotel comes with more than just a view.
The lady that used to be the maid here before I bought the place has quite a few stories of the pillows getting thrown out of the room after she cleaned the room. People have talked about hearing steps in the hallway when they're in the rooms at night, yet they're the only guests here, and people don't roam around because we lock it up at night.
Lager's ghost has only rarely been seen. One of the few people to actually witness the apparition was the 10-year-old son of a woman who bought the hotel some years after Lager died.
Like children that age, they're very active and used to run around the hotel a lot. During the week, the hotel wasn't occupied. We ran by room 7, and this gentleman came out, a stately-looking gentleman with a mustache, and said, "Sonny, will you keep it down?" And closed the door.
Not expecting anyone to be in the hotel, the terrified boy ran downstairs and told his mother that the man in the picture above the bar was upstairs. When the child's mother went to investigate, she found the room empty, but eerily she smelled the unmistakable odor of cigar smoke.
I knew a little bit about the hotel, but not as much as I found out after I purchased it. And it goes on every day. There's something new every day.
They say that you can't take it with you. But in this case, a man's greed was so strong that even death couldn't separate him from his earthly possessions or from Earth itself.
George met his untimely demise. He was shot up here in room 7, from what I understand. And I guess that it would be, they say that people go back to, where they died or where they're used to being.
This disastrous accident started a legend that motivated many people to come to these tracks. I'm determined to check it out for myself.
The skeptic in most of us thinks seeing is believing. Well, in our next story, we investigate an amazing tale of young children whose spirits seem to remain here as guardian angels, and whose fingerprints are often left on their handiwork. A sign from beyond.
More often than not, ghost stories are frightening, but even more frightening when the story is true. Let's go back to the south side of San Antonio. It was late one evening in 1984 when Paula Williams was driving home from work, taking her usual route. A young girl standing alone on the side of the road caught her attention.
Are you all right? Do you need a ride?
The girl only nodded a yes and got in the car.
What's your name, honey?
She gave Paula her name and pointed to where she lived.
Cindy Sue.
Cindy Sue was extremely quiet and seemed to stare through Paula. It unnerved her. As they drove, they passed over some railroad tracks. Cindy Sue's eyes met the sign and locked. At her house, Cindy Sue remained in the car. Paula thought she might be having problems at home and suggested that she would go first and talk to her parents. Paula told the woman who answered the door her daughter, Cindy Sue, was waiting in the car.
Hello.
She started yelling and even threatened to call the police if Paula didn't get off her property. Then she said the strangest thing.
Your child's
Just
in the car.
let Cindy Sue rest in peace.
Paula was taken back by the strange turn of events and walked back to the car, confused. When she got to the car, no one was there. Paula remembered Cindy Sue fastening her seatbelt and locking her door. The door was still locked and the seatbelt still fastened, but Cindy Sue had vanished. It was on her way back when Paula remembered why everything felt so unsettling. It was the street names near the railroad track. All of them the names which belonged to children. Behind this discovery was the tragic tale of innocent children, and even more so, their remaining spirits.
Okay, so Roy, where are we?
We're out on the southern part of San Antonio on Mission Road.
Now this is the famous road, right?
This is the famous road where the children were killed in the bus accident back in the 40s.
It was a cold but clear afternoon when a school bus was making its last delivery of school children. About 10 children were still on the bus. The bus had to cross the railroad tracks. There was no warning of the oncoming train.
The bus stalled on the track and the train come along, and before the kids could get off, it hit the school bus and killed all the kids.
This disastrous accident started a legend that motivated many people to come to these tracks.
From any of these places here, you can stop your car, completely stop it, turn the motor off and leave it in neutral, and it will pick up speed all the way till it gets across the railroad track.
The strange thing about this is that the road doesn't go downhill. It doesn't even run level.
If you look to the railroad track, it appears that the road is elevated.
There's no question. I mean, I can see a hill going up.
Okay, how do these cars get up the hill by themselves?
If people's cars stall or something, these children supposedly pushes the car across the track to safety.
It's come through the safety zone.
And once they're safe of the railroad track, then the car stops.
Skeptics say the explanation may be a magnetic field in the area. But how do they explain what happens next? Fingerprints on the back of the cars, as if some imaginary hands pushed it forward. Putting powder on the back of the car helps to see the fingerprints clearly.
They say on the bumper and on the trunk. I think with the wind, we'll do it right here and see what happens. I'm determined to check it out for myself. I watched a couple of cars do it, but just to see if it can really happen. This is about where they say they stop. Turn the car off, put it in neutral. Take my foot off the brake. And just sit here and start going. And it's beginning to pick up speed. This is amazing. No hands, no feet. This car is just going on its own. Across the railroad track, I'm gonna have to brake because now we're gonna go downhill.
There was no doubt in my mind the car was pushed over those tracks. Was it gravity, or was it the legendary little spirits? There was only one way to find out, and there it was. I could feel my heart beating.
Possible finger marks right here. And a couple of prints right here. Well, that really is pretty amazing.
Although we weren't able to find anyone to verify every detail of this story, one fact does remain. There hasn't been a single train accident on this set of tracks since the children's tragedy in the 1940s. Somehow, every stalled car has managed to cross the tracks, reaching the other side in safety.
There was one thing I still wanted to find out. What did Paula see that night on her way back home?
This is the neighborhood supposedly where they have street signs with the children's names from the accident.
Bobby, Alan, Nancy, Carol. It was here in the streets close to the railroad tracks where we found the answer to Paula's mysterious young rider who never reached her house that fateful afternoon. Cindy Sue.
As we've just witnessed, activity from the beyond knows no geographical boundaries or language barriers. No matter where these stories turn up, the similarity of events is startling. It's hard to dismiss the possibility that this phenomenon exists without turning a deaf ear to our famous ghost stories. I'm Patrick Macnee. Thanks for being with me. Until next time, goodbye.